Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our last session on energy, and please be seated as soon as possible. And I'm going to give the word to the moderator of this session, Professor Michael Kane. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to our panel discussion on regional energy networks and their policy implications. This is the last panel for today, and I'm glad that they saved the best for last. My name is Michael Kane, and I'm the director for the Center for the Study of Democracy at St. Mary's College in Maryland. I also have worked with USAID for about 8 years on energy issues. And I am absolutely delighted to be chairing this panel of distinguished senior policy analysts, and I look forward to an interesting discussion with you all on this. I think the way we'll work this is I'll first introduce the panelists, and then I'll ask each of the panelists to make remarks of 5 or 7 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Perhaps we'll pose a few questions ourselves. And if everyone behaves well, perhaps we'll be out of here by about 4:30. We only have 3 panelists today with us. Let me take this opportunity to introduce each of our panelists. We have, it's Fatih Boltagi, and he graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering in 1993. He's the founder and chairman of the board of the Akfel Group. And he's also chairman and board of directors of Enerco Energy, which carries out import and sale of natural gas in Turkey. He's also the president of the Natural Gas Importers and Exporters Association. I'm also happy to have with us today Mr. Greg Saunders. He's a senior director of international affairs in BP's Washington, D.C. office. He's responsible for the Caspian, Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. And prior to joining BP, he was director of for policy at the Corporate Council in Africa, a corporate NGO in Washington, D.C. here. He culminated his career in the U.S. military in 2000, following assignments in the Office of Secretary of Defense and postings in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. He has an MBA from George Washington, an MA from the Naval Postgraduate School, and a BS in engineering from West Point. And finally, we have with us today Ambassador Ross Wilson, who many of you already know. He's currently the director for the Eurasian Center at the Atlantic Council. He's also a lecturer in international affairs at George Washington University. Of course, he has been, in December of 2008, he completed really a long time distinguished service with the State Department, including 6 years as ambassador to Turkey in 2005, 2008, and Azerbaijan in 2000 and 2003. Ambassador Wilson also served as Chief of Staff for Deputy Secretary of State Bob Zoellick in 2005. And he was chief U.S. negotiator for the Free Trade Area of the Americas while working for the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in 2003 through 2005. Among other things, he was Deputy Executive Secretary of State in 92 and 94, managing the policy processes for Secretaries Lawrence Eagleberger and Warren Christopher. He received a bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota and a master's from Columbia and the U.S. National War College. He also served as chairman of the board of the Institute of Turkish Studies, as a member of the American Academy of Diplomacy. Well, let's get to it. I would like to make a few remarks and talk a little bit about the general picture in the region. And I want to talk about really the view of energy issues as they relate both to Central Europe, Turkey, and the other EU members. And I'd like to make 3 basic points. One point, and I think this is much of the discussion will really focus on the supply side of energy in Turkey. I'll make a few points about that, but there are two other points I'd like to talk about, and that's the institutional side and regulatory side of energy, the importance of energy reform, as well as the demand side of energy consumption in the region. I do not need to really tell you all about the strategic and geographic significance of Turkey in building regional energy networks. Its geography makes it a crucial and important regional actor and an important partner in building secure and reliable energy networks in the Black Sea region, in the energy community, and of course for the EU members. Turkey's proximity to large gas supplies in the Middle East, along with its crucial location to gas supplies in the Caspian region, make Turkey an important strategic partner for the EU's long-term goal to achieve greater energy security by allowing for greater diversity in supplies to European gas markets. And much of the discussion here, we have experts that can talk directly to the issue of both infrastructure and gas distribution. Yesterday, for those who are keeping score, the US-EU Energy Council met in Washington and explicitly acknowledged the importance of the gas transit agreement between Turkey and Azerbaijan and the commercial discussions on the Shah Deniz Consortium, which we'll hear more about, and I know you'll be able to comment on that today. All of this really opens the possibility of multiple sources of gas for the Southern Corridor and the Black Sea region. And it really builds toward the long-term goal of accessing natural gas in the Caspian region. Perhaps we'll also get a chance to talk about China's role as well in the Caspian and their energy needs. In terms of the institutional side, the security of energy supplies and its importance for strengthening the reliability of energy provision is really just one part of energy policy puzzle both to Turkey and to the region. The other critical component is the liberalization of energy markets to allow for greater regional integration and improved market functioning. Now, this involves a number of distinct parts. It involves public sector laws and regulations that allow for stable and transparent energy market operations, which will lower investor risk, fair market pricing for residential and commercial consumers, the elimination of state-run energy monopolies to enhance regional energy trade and competition. These actions are the cornerstone of the EU and energy community policies in the region. They've, of course, also been backed by the United States. Turkey and other energy community contracting parties have made considerable progress along a number of dimensions here, but important institutional and policy issues remain, I think, to be addressed both in the gas and the electricity sector. And finally, the demand side. The demand side is often overlooked, an often overlooked feature, in my opinion, of this whole equation, not just for the supply of energy and the infrastructure needs, but the kind of demand. Demand is going up dramatically, not only in Turkey, but also in Europe. And a critical issue for this stopping, or at least slowing this increasing demand, is really progress in energy efficiency and progress in renewables. And this is not easy to do. Achieving the progress, especially in residential energy efficiency, is a difficult and long-term project, but it's certainly something that I think needs to be addressed. I think I'll turn it over now to the panelists. I wanted to talk about those three major issues and let the panelists take over. So if you would, Fatih.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kane. Well, it's a great honor for me to be here. As you have said, Turkey, with given geography, blessed geography, is a natural hub, actually, for energy streams. And since years, since decades, just because of the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits, it was a natural the corridor for energy products. Most of the Russian oil is passing through the Turkish Strait, which is another issue for Turkey as well. But and also the Iraqi oil pipeline, which is also acting since quite a long time, was pumping out the Iraqi oil from Kirkuk to Yumurtalık to Ceyhan for a substantial amount of even the wartime. But the latest development for the oil was of course, Baku BTC pipeline was a remarkable achievement for Turkey and the region. So, from the oil perspective, Turkey become as a corridor. Today, I would like to argue a bit more. Turkey is a corridor or a hub, or is there any potential features or parameters for Turkey to be a hub? So from the perspective of the oil, it has already achieved. There is still a lot of way to go maybe for the oil, when we will see still the Kazakh and the Caspian oil is finding other routes to flow the world market. But the real challenge and opportunity for Turkey is in the gas, which is the next century's the energy source. Having vicinity with all suppliers, almost 60% of the gas reserves are in the vicinity of Turkey. And Turkey is only the country having direct pipeline, direct neighborhood with the producers, minimum three producers in Europe, saying Russia, saying Azerbaijan. With all respect, the Georgians, they are almost like Turkey, so we don't see them that they're like Azerbaijan and Georgia is one border, and Iran. And without mentioning Iraq, and without mentioning even the Mediterranean gas, which is possibly the offshore gas is coming ahead. So Turkey has a good opportunity from its own supply purposes, as well as from a perspective of passing through all these resources to the west. So it has geographical blessing is there. Stability, of course, you don't have, the geography doesn't help you at all. Itself, stability is an important issue. In the last decade, Turkey has shown a considerable economic growth, not economic-wise as well, from the democratic perspective as well. So stability is also going ahead. Market size and quality, you have mentioned, is also an important issue. Turkey today, from the gas perspective, is one of in the first 5 big markets in Europe. We are reaching 43 BCM this year, which is going ahead up to 50 and even 60 BCM. So it will be in the first 3 markets in Turkey. The quality of the market, regulation-wise, is still an issue. I agree with you in the sense this has to be addressed. And of course, the other point from the perspective of the pipelines, whether Turkey is an investment-friendly environment or not. I mean, just giving the facts of the coming 10 years, the Turkey need to invest between $100 to $150 billion only in energy infrastructure. So it needs to have environmental friendly, the investors, it should be friendly. Otherwise, Turkey cannot cope with the equity requirements. So we need foreign investors, we need foreign equity for energy. So that's why having these all 4 features, I think it will make Turkey potentially a correct place to play this energy game. But as well, there are some concerns that I would like to address later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come back to those for sure. This is Greg.
Thanks. And thanks everybody for attending and agreeing to join us on a late afternoon. And also congratulations to the Turkic American Alliance for its inaugural conference this year. Well done. It's just an extraordinary audience. So congratulations to the Alliance and to the organizers. And thanks once again for the opportunity to join this distinguished panel to speak. I thought I would speak a little bit, taking the page from my good colleague, about natural gas. And specifically this transformational event that is underway right now before our very eyes around the production and the transit of gas from the Caspian through Turkey into European markets. Years past, most of the focus on energy in Turkey and in the region was on oil. Many referred in the 1990s and in the last decade to oil as the great game. And Turkey played a fundamental role in facilitating the movement, the transit of that oil from Central Asia and the Caspian through that part of the region, through the Caucasus, Turkey, to global markets. My good friend Ross Wilson during his time, both in Baku as well as in Ankara, played an instrumental role in facilitating the realization of a number of projects, most importantly of which is the famous pipeline, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. But the game has changed. The transformational dynamic is now around gas. And who services growing European demand for natural gas? Europe faces a significant supply-demand gap starting at the end of this decade. And countries, companies are now competing for that market. And at the center of this dynamic is Turkey. So I thought I would give you some insights from a private sector point of view and from a company that's participating in this new great game. A snapshot, a look, a little bit of detail about the famous Shah Deniz natural gas project coming from Azerbaijan. This project, as I mentioned, is located in the Caspian Sea, offshore Azerbaijan. The field is one of the largest gas fields in the world. It is now producing a little over 8 billion cubic meters of gas per annum. 80% of that gas is exported to Turkey. The project team, a consortium led by BP and Statoil, is now looking to expand production, increase production from 8.5 BCMA to 25, tripling production from this field, which will require the installation of new platforms, new pipelines, expanded terminals in Azerbaijan and Georgia. It is a massive undertaking at a cost of a little over $20 billion. Even in the oil business, in the energy business, $28 billion is a big number. As I mentioned, it will produce an additional 16 BCMA of gas, as well as 100,000 barrels of oil equivalent or condensate, which will be transported through BTC. Altogether, this natural gas project constitutes probably one of the most complex, costly, but most politically important natural gas projects that the world sees today. Now let's move on to Turkey. What's Turkey's role in this? I'm absolutely delighted to inform you that, quite frankly, thanks to the extraordinary visionary efforts of both the Azerbaijani and Turkish governments, Azerbaijan and Turkey signed a landmark agreement, actually series of agreements, that will enable the transit of Azerbaijan gas, Shah Deniz gas, through Turkey into Europe. This gas sales agreement sets out the term for the sale of 6 BCMA to Turkey, actually to BOTAŞ, building on the existing Phase 1 sales, and maintaining Turkey as the leading importer of Azeri gas. But even more importantly, the agreements feature, and this is the transformational part, a transit agreement for transiting Shah Deniz gas through Turkey to European markets, a total of 10 BCMA. So the Shah Deniz consortium has made 10 billion cubic meters available to Europe. What I think is important to understand is that this agreement between Azerbaijan and Turkey called for the transit through one of 2 ways. The first is that the gas could move through the existing BOTAŞ network, an upgrade of about $2 to $3 billion in the Turkish natural gas infrastructure, the grid, or the construction of a new standalone pipe from the Turkish-Georgia border through Turkey to Turkey's western borders. Equally importantly, these agreements recognize two important principles: sustainability and scalability. Sustainability must enjoy strong political support from both regional governments as well as the markets in Europe, and scalability, be able to expand over time as additional gas becomes available from Azerbaijan, potentially Iraq, potentially Turkmenistan. Shah Deniz project is the first of just a beginning, what now opens up the famous Southern Corridor. Some of you have heard about this. Southern Corridor, gas corridor, which takes Azeri gas or Caspian gas through the region into Europe. Finally, there's been a lot of publicity, discussion, and commentary around the European angle to this project. So we talked about the first part, which was the production of the gas in Azerbaijan. The second part is the transit through Turkey. And the third is the export consortia, the export routes into Europe. Many of you will be familiar with these names. Three established projects, namely Nabucco, TAP, and IGI Poseidon. The Shah Deniz Consortium has been holding extensive discussions with each of these consortium, these companies, and with a broad range of gas buyers. The consortium asked for requests for proposals and a package. Each of these three consortiums submitted a proposal for the purchase of the gas on the 1st of October. The Shah Deniz Consortium is now evaluating the technical and commercial terms of these three offers and intends on making a decision, a selection, sometime later on next month or in early January. And the criteria is well established, well known, a fair, balanced process for the selection of the right pipelines. Moreover, the Shah Deniz Consortium is also evaluating a fourth potential export option that would transport this gas into markets in southeastern Europe. This option, basically, it would be connecting the existing gas grids across Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Croatia. Holds the key advantage of reducing pipeline costs while maintaining the potential of scalability. This concept, this idea will also be evaluated alongside the three consortium offers, Nabucco, TAP, and IGI Poseidon. So I just gave you a little bit of an idea of the dynamic around this process that's playing out right now. The next to last piece of this incredibly complex mosaic was this landmark agreement between Azerbaijan and Turkey that allowed for the transit of gas. And this now will open up the Southern Corridor and kick off the next great game around gas, a truly transformational energy event that puts Turkey once again at the center of the regional energy dynamic. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. It is indeed a transformational agreement, and I think you're absolutely right to emphasize its importance, and the next part of this game is how to fill it, and so I'm sure we're going to get to that. And before we do, I'll ask Ambassador Ross to make some remarks.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I see a number of friendly faces around the room. It's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this. What I thought I would do is sort of pick up where Greg has left off, this transformational nature of the decisions that BP, its consortium partners, and Azerbaijan will be making about the route for the next pipeline and for the full development of the Shah Deniz gas field. So what that means, what the position that Turkey finds itself in now means, and what are some of the challenges for Turkish diplomacy in general and Turkish energy diplomacy in particular are as you look ahead over the next couple of years. One thing that Greg did not say is that he did not reflect on how long it took to reach this agreement that was signed in Izmir at the end of October. Turkey and Azerbaijan have been working on this for years. A number of us, including the United States, including me, but also the European Union and others, trying over a long period of time to cajole Baku and Ankara to reach an agreement that would provide for the transit of substantial volumes of Caspian gas across Turkey and into Europe. The lack of that agreement not only has been a roadblock for the development of Shah Deniz. Why would you develop Shah Deniz if you can't figure out where the gas is going to go? But it also has effectively bottled up or at least slowed down decisions on other gas in the region. To phrase it the other way around, decisions now being made on the southern gas corridor will in turn generate decisions on other gas. It will attract other gas to what now looks not like a pipe dream that is some Washington bureaucrat or politician's idea of what ought to happen, but the reality of a pipeline that's being built that whether literally because of the way it's designed or at least figuratively, is a scalable thing that opens the door for gas from other places. I was in Turkey 2 weeks ago for a conference that the Atlantic Council puts on, the Black Sea Energy and Economic Forum. One of the main things talked about there is Iraqi gas, and in particular gas from northern Iraq. And Fatih can probably elaborate on this some. Lots of real interest now. The Iraqi Kurds can see that a pipeline now actually is going to be built, probably, or at least it looks like it's in prospect. They can be part of this developing energy transit trade across Turkey to European markets. It's good for them politically, it's good for them economically, it's good for the development of their energy industry, and also, of course, plays a role in Iraq's own internal political dynamic, and in particular the struggles having to do with the hydrocarbon legislation there. Southern Gas Corridor also at least opens the prospect for gas on the other side of the Caspian to come to the west. In a life many years ago, I was involved in some of the discussions about a trans-Caspian gas pipeline that would bring gas across the Caspian from Turkmenistan. I don't know what are the short to medium term prospects of such a pipeline. The Turkmen are, I think just in the last week or so, announced a major new deal with China to buy substantial additional quantities. Turkmenistan's got tremendous amounts of gas. The fact now that something actually looks like it might be happening from Baku through Turkey to Europe changes what was always at most theoretical conversation about the transit of Turkmen gas to the west into one that's practical and that can have benefits not only in terms of more gas for Europe, but also in resolving or heading people toward a resolution of the status of the Caspian, a resolution of what has been a long and not particularly cheerful dialogue between Baku and Ashgabat about their own bilateral relations in ways that can be helpful. I was in Uzbekistan in the spring. The Uzbeks look at, in the same way, at a Baku to Europe gas pipeline or gas transit system as an opportunity for them. Kazakhs maybe a little bit less so, their quality and other issues, but they're basically just re-injecting their gas. They could maybe potentially at least look at some opportunities to move their gas through the same network. Maybe not literally through that pipeline that BP and its partners will be developing, but through that southern gas corridor that now actually starts to look like it has legs. The making any of those things happen, and I would submit actually even to some extent realizing the first stage of the southern gas pipeline, there have been important decisions to be made, but there's still about 1 million questions that have to be resolved, requires some important, sensitive, and very active Turkish diplomacy to make happen. There will remain, I know that there will remain a number of important issues between Turkey and Azerbaijan today. There are many details that maybe are less important in the cosmic scheme of things, but details that will have to be worked out. There's a way you conduct that diplomacy if you want to resolve these things. That wasn't the diplomacy that was being conducted when I was in Turkey by Azerbaijan and Ankara, frankly. But it's where they are now. There's a lot of work to do. Similarly, Turkish diplomacy with respect to the Iraqi Kurds, and I would submit Turkish diplomacy in Iraq in helping Baghdad and Erbil work out an acceptable arrangement that allows Iraq to benefit, all of Iraq to benefit, including the Iraqi Kurds, from gas sales opportunities that may come to fruition as a result of this expanded gas corridor, and Turkish diplomacy in Central Asia to try to wire those pieces together. And I think Turkish diplomacy is not the only thing that's going to make this happen, make that broader southern gas corridor happen, but I would submit that without some real tough work by the Turkish authorities, these things are probably not likely to come to fruition anytime in the very near future. The last thing I'll say is to come back to something you referred to in your opening remarks, and Fatih did as well, this idea of Turkey as an energy hub, or a transit country. Turkey now is well positioned to expand its role as an energy transit route. That's what BTC is. That is what I think in the first instance what BP, its partners in Azerbaijan, are talking about. That's an important role. It leverages Turkey's geography well. There's transit revenue that comes from this. There may be follow-on development that flows from it. For Turkey to become an energy hub, an energy exchange, requires a whole different set of things that you referred to in your opening remarks, Professor, about liberalizing Turkey's own domestic energy market that can transform Turkey from just being a transit route into being a real energy center in the region. That I know is a current line of discussions that official Washington is having with Turkey. There's a lot of work to do there. There is the amount of wealth that can be generated for Turkey from being an energy exchange, a real energy exchange, dwarfs the kind of revenue that it can generate for itself as a transit country. And I think it's something that many of you here in the energy business or influential on the margins with respect to the overall business climate in Turkey and the specific energy markets in particular can play a very helpful role. So why don't I stop there and go on
Thank you
with the
very much.
discussion.
Yeah. Maybe before I turn it over, we can follow up a little bit some of the remarks that have been made. A little bit about, you mentioned sensitive diplomacy that needs to take place to realize some of the gains that have just been made and the agreements that have just been struck. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you think that some of the main challenges in that diplomacy are for Ankara?
Well, I did identify a couple off the top of my head. One is, I did refer to, is the problem of Iraq's overall hydrocarbon regime and hydrocarbon legislation. It's been bottled up in the Iraqi parliament for the last 5 years, I think, or 4 at least. Certainly it was being discussed when I left Turkey in 2008, and it hasn't really moved an inch since then. Our efforts have not them proven to be successful U.S. government efforts. Our influence in Iraq is declining for obvious reasons. Turkey's is increasing for obvious reasons, and I think that's an area where perhaps Turkey can be helpful in brokering a solution among the various players in Iraq on this matter. Second, there's the issue which could come after an overall hydrocarbon agreement, or perhaps it could come before, is brokering some kind of an arrangement that provides for the export of Iraqi Kurdish gas or gas in northern Iraq northward across that border. That's not going to be something that's specifically dealt with in the overall hydrocarbon legislation, I don't think. And especially if that legislation remains bottled up, but gas is ready to move, it's not inconceivable that there can be an arrangement worked out that provides for the export of that gas to Turkey. But then what's the regime? What are the transit terms? Are the transit terms that were agreed upon with Azerbaijan the ones that are going to play here? How do the benefits get weighed, and so on and so forth? I think similarly with Turkey may be able to play a helpful role between Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. This, too, is an area where U.S. diplomacy has not been particularly effective. Turkey, I think, has some baggage in both countries, and we can be honest about that. Again, the prospect of actually being able to move gas west starts to change the dynamic in Ashgabat. The prospect of making long-term money off of that transit of gas west might change the attitudes in Baku in ways that could be helpful. I think that there could be some opportunities for Turkish diplomacy. And even on matters related to the immediate project, if the ultimate decision is a set of pipelines that, or a scheme that's aimed primarily at southeastern Europe, I would guess that Turkey will see for itself opportunities to leverage some of that work in ways that support Turkey's overall political agenda in the Balkans, which I think in turn can help to leverage the kind of broader market that BP wants to generate. I noticed in your list of countries there were a few Balkan countries that you didn't mention, like Serbia. Obviously there's a heap of political contradictions in the Balkans. Turkey has been active on those at a time when U.S. and EU attention to those matters has dropped because we've been focused on other things. There too, I think there may be some helpful synergies.
And I would mention one more, taking on Ross's point. This was a fundamental concern in the recent Azerbaijan-Turkey agreement around transit and gas sales. If our friends from Brussels were here, this would be the first thing they talk about. One of the advantages, one of the principal strategic and political advantages of the southern corridor is to diversify Europe's source of gas supply. Some refer to the southern corridor as the fourth corridor. The other three come out of Russia. Yet those in Europe still sting from the recent decisions or disputes, if you will, between Moscow and Kiev that resulted in the cutoff of Gazprom's supply into and through Ukraine. One of the really thorny issues in this Azerbaijan-Turkey transit agreement was to create the conditions that would prevent another Ukraine. That there were assurances provided to the purchasers of Azeri gas that in fact there would not be an interruption in the regular supply. And so the terms, one of the terms of this transit agreement is that the agreement is based on international law, specifically Swiss law. And this was an insistence of not only countries in Europe, but also the producers, in this case the Shah Deniz Consortium, that there was an internationally recognized legal regime, arbitration regime, that the partners or the buyers could then employ if, in fact, there were disruptions along the way. So this is another area in which Turkey can not only facilitate the movement of additional supply, this concept that Ross referred to as a hub, but also provide the market, the commercial, but more importantly, the political assurance that Turkey will be a valued and trusted transit partner for Europe.
I think that that's a very good point, that bringing up the delight perhaps of the European Union about this agreement and the hope that they can diversify their gas supplies through this agreement is no doubt an important hope. Can we, since we have two people from the private sector, could you say a little bit about meeting the needs of European gas demand? Those gas demands are tremendous. If you look, say, to 2016, Central Europe is going to, there's a projected demand of about 26%. There is tremendous demand in the region for gas into this next decade. As well, Turkey continues to consume more and more amounts of gas and energy. Can you say a little bit about the current infrastructure needs, and the future needs of infrastructure, and what can, in your view, be realistically met by the private sector, and perhaps some of the barriers to meeting those needs?
Thank you very much. First of all, the Europe's needs is huge, and as you said, that the numbers are there. And then I don't believe the shale gas or the non-conventional gas success like in the US will not happen in Europe because of the environmental issues. And I don't believe as well the LNG will be the source for the solution for the Europe's problem, especially after the Fukushima incident. We have seen that the volatility of the LNG prices is very high. So that's why the Europe will depend on the pipelines, and that's inevitably they need a fourth corridor or south corridor. On the other hand, the Turkey's demand is growing very fast, and the very first contracts of Turkey will be ceasing by the coming 10 decades. The very first long-term contract signed by Turkey with the Russian Federation ends 1st of January this next year. So this is the 25th anniversary of the first long-term pipeline contract that Turkey signed. And on the way, 2014, 4 BCM Algerian contract finish, 2022 another 8 BCM contract finish, and 2022 as well 6 BCM Azeri Shatin is one contract. So that if you add up the Turkish demand as well as the diminishing the contract, Turkey will need in the next decade between 10 to 20 BCM. And if you just sum up the coming gas, 16 BCM, let's say, I believe that much more will come from Azerbaijan. Well, let's say, I think a minimum 20 BCM. And then I agree with the Northern Iraqi gas. Between 10, I was in the same conference with Ross, and then the minister from the Kurdistan region mentioned tremendous numbers. I mean, I double-checked with him. He was mentioning 20 BCM by 2017. So basically, 2017 is the time both Shahtinis phase 2 and also, let's say, Iraq, and let's be very conservative, let's say 5 to 10 BCM. These all can be already to utilize by Turkey. And Turkey has an advantage to pay much more advantages from the netback perspective in comparison with the European off-takers. So I wish there will be a Turkish ministry representatives here. But I agree with the Ross, there's a lot of diplomacy has to be done, but there's also some internal decision has to be done, because there's a conflicting ideas inside of the Turkish energy community. Okay, we have to care of the security supply of the Europe, but what about our security? Turkey so far bought very expensive gas. So the Turkey understood that we have to utilize and leverage this pipeline to first to supply security, second to get the best cost gas, as well as a leverage I'm not suggesting that Turkey will try to use the same like the Ukrainian issue. But the Turkey, that's why I think we need more gas from the region. But the Turkey's concerns has to be addressed, especially projects like Nabucco was a European Union project, was backed by European Union. But Turkey also sees is a matter of negotiation in the European accession. So there's a lot of not only the energy politics, also the let's say international politics has to be addressed. But I think the Turkish energy policymakers will have to fix their idea, whether they have to let the pipelines to be built by the suppliers, or this should be a common pipeline for Turkey. If as you said, the BP or Sakar Steel will establish their pipelines, this will serve only for Azeri gas, and is there a room for the northern Iraqi gas? Or at the end we will come up with 3 other pipelines. What will be the capacity of pipelines? 16 BCM, 30 BCM? What the Russians will say. If you say 30 BCM, it's Nabucco, Russians don't like. If you say 16 BCM, is another. So how the Iraqi gas will transport from Turkey? I agree the Shah Deniz 2 agreement was remarkable, at least after a long time. But as far as I know, the Turkish Energy Ministry, they are saying that we have only agreed for 16 BCM. Any other cubic meter, there's another discussion has to be discussed. So that will make a bit bitter in the coming days. So that's.
I can jump in. I'm sorry, I'm making 3 points. BP is one of the largest producers of gas in this part of the world. It is also one of the largest sellers or marketers of gas in Europe. So you can imagine we spend a fair amount of time understanding both the supply dynamic, but more importantly, the market dynamic, country by country, region, sub-region by sub-region. A lot of time understanding future demand in various places of Europe. So I'd make 3 points. Number one is I started my comments by talking about the next great game. The professor is absolutely right. Competition is underway among countries and companies to fill the mushrooming supply and demand gap in Europe, specifically Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Southeastern Europe. Those countries seek to do 2 things. Number one is diversify their supply. Many of them are completely tethered to Russia. And secondly, they want, through diversification, allows them to leverage their negotiations with other suppliers, specifically Gazprom. Second is with respect to infrastructure, keep in mind 1 point, and as you look at this dynamic, as you study this dynamic, add 1 point, 1 word, scalability. A pipeline built, a gas pipeline built today must be scalable. You must be able to expand that pipe over time as additional supply becomes available. So if you hear countries or companies talking about a certain size pipe and it's not scalable, it'll be likely not commercial and may not be built. Third is price. This entire dynamic is about price. The challenge for producers, such as Azerbaijan, such as Iraq, such as other countries, selling their gas into Europe, is that they must sell it at a price below the current market price. So you hear people talk about volumes. It's really about price. And you can relate to this. If you have a choice between buying a car at X price or Y price, and the cars are similar, if not identical, you're going to buy it at the lower price. The only way new suppliers can gain access to European markets is based on price. They have to undercut the Gazprom price. And this is what goes back to the choice of the pipelines, the terms, the tariffs, the investment infrastructure, the investment environment in transit countries. must be in a position to facilitate the movement of that gas so that the buyer, the price to the buyer, is less than the Gazprom price. That's what this whole thing is about, price. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Let me, it did make sense. And let's open this up. Let's allow some questions since we've gone about almost an hour now, and open it up, please.
I wanted to comment about the ambassador mentioned the follow-on development and transit and it being a transit route. This morning in our earlier discussions, we heard about a railroad that might go from China to Europe that would be able to take containers there as the containers go to Long Beach and across the U.S. now for trade. And you all had talked about pipelines going into Southeast Europe. My question is, has there ever been a thought about having a transit corridor which would go through Turkey but that would go to Europe to combine the, obviously, the revenues of those two aspects of transit and trade?
Well, the short answer probably is yes. Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Georgia right now are building a railway that I think it's called the Kars-Baku Railway that connects by rail across Georgia, Baku, and Turkey. The old railway line that used to connect them runs, or that could otherwise connect them, runs through Armenia, and that is kind of not available, shall we say. In addition to that, I heard when I was in Baku this summer about plans that the Azeris at least have to hugely expand the merchant marine capacities, Azerbaijan's merchant marine capacities on the Caspian for moving goods east-west, and maybe other directions too, but from east to west across the Caspian. I think in part this builds off of the idea of the northern distribution network that the United States has developed across different countries in Central Asia and the Caucasus, including Azerbaijan, to supply American and coalition forces in Afghanistan. But it could certainly be the kind of thing that you're referring to. I have also heard talk among Central Asians about new rail lines that would go from Turkmenistan across to China, across as well as new lines that run through Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So I think a network is developing. Is there a single sort of corridor? No. But these bits and pieces are developing because people can see it could be very advantageous to ship goods directly across the huge Eurasian landmass rather than shipping them all the way around through the South China Sea that now looks somewhat more uncertain than it used to, across, either through the Gulf of Suez or around Africa, but potentially in ways that expose yourself to East African pirates, or perhaps West African pirates once you get on the other side, and I understand there's a growth industry going on there too. So I think this is developing, but in bits and pieces.
Yes.
Thank you very much. It's Kıvanç Ulusoy from Istanbul University. I have two questions. First of all, to Mr. Saunders, you rightly mentioned Europe's dependence of energy, and you rightly mentioned that it has been Europe's main strategy. It is in depth of Europe's strategic thinking, and I would like your comments whether this intervention to Libya, would in a way diversify Europe's energy needs, and in this sense, its dependence towards Russia. So it will, in fact, give a kind of free hand to Europe and be less dependent to Russia, and including these pipelines. My second question goes to Mr. Ambassador Ross Wilson. Mr. Ambassador, I mean, I think you gave a talk, but it seems from your talk that you regard all these issues as a kind of technical problems. But looking at the political context of these pipeline projects, what do you see a kind of progress? What kind of progress you see in relations between the countries in Caucasus, for instance, the Armenian issue and Turkey, Russian interaction in Caucasus? Thank you very much.
Craig, you want to Libyan supply?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very good question, and I think fundamental to understanding the overall dynamic in Europe. First, I would not want to presuppose the strategic political reasons that Europe decided to intervene in Libya. However, it's important to point out that at the time of the NATO intervention, Libya exported to Europe both oil as well as gas. There is a pipeline called Green Stream, operated by Eni, the Italian company, that transports a substantial amount of gas from Libya into Italian markets. Most of the world focused on oil and the sudden increase of oil prices after the NATO intervention in Libya. Not well known, but actually far more important to European energy markets was the sudden drop, the sudden absence of substantial gas supplies into Italy and in the middle of the winter. And the Italians nearly ran out of natural gas. Where did they go to get new supply? Who stepped in to substitute for that Libyan supply? The only company who had excess supply available and had the contracts in place and the infrastructure in place? Gazprom. So ironically, one of the energy consequences of the military intervention in Libya was to strengthen the hand of Gazprom and its supply arrangements into Italy. You can imagine that one of the things that Eni is trying to do right now is to quickly reestablish gas production in Libya and reestablish the operations of the pipeline. That's number one. The second piece is that today Gazprom has about 28 to 30% of the market share in Europe overall in the 27 countries of the European Union. As we look out to the next sort of 15 years, we as a company predict that that market share will stabilize. It will not increase, it will not decrease. That Europe is already committed to diversifying its supply, as you pointed out, through two mechanisms. Number one is it is negotiating an array of different supply contracts from different sources. Algeria is one, which has 2 gas pipelines from Algeria into Europe, is now building a third. It is looking to bring additional supply out of Egypt, additional supply out of the Caribbean, additional supply from other sources. And the second is many countries in Europe are building LNG facilities or regasification facilities to take additional LNG on the global market. One of the interesting consequences of the explosion in gas production in the U.S. is that much of the LNG supply originally earmarked for the U.S. is now being diverted into Europe. And with the construction of these LNG facilities in places like Poland, the Balkans, Italy, other countries, is now Europe will soon be in a much better place to diversify its sources of supply, less dependent on one dominant supplier, able to leverage these gas contracts for negotiations with its dominant supplier, particularly with the focus, as I mentioned before, on the sort of post-Soviet or the Soviet space, Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. very important dynamic to understand.
Thank you. Thank you.
Energy and politics. Sure. There's the line in the military theory book by Clausewitz is war is the extension of politics by other means. In a different conference a couple of years ago, I remarked that energy is the extension of politics by other means, given the way that Russia, in particular, has used energy as a tool in its diplomacy for relatively destructive ends, including destructive of its own interests. Clearly, there's a political context in which these pipelines happen and in which these energy resources are being developed, and there are political consequences that flow from that development. To the extent that one makes the politics the goal of developing, of working on these projects, it ends up being a frustrating and a complicating factor, especially today. And I think the politics around Nabucco or the Southern Corridor is one of the reasons why, maybe not the most important, but one of the reasons why it took Azerbaijan and Turkey so long to sort of pull the pieces together, because there were too many political axes being ground at the same time in ways that just complicated matters too much. Politics was at the forefront when BTC was developed, and there was, let's be honest, some fairly ruthless diplomacy in which the United States played a significant role, and thank you, Greg, I've had a little bit to do with this too, in making that happen. The politics and the economics, maybe especially the economics of gas and gas development are different. The politics are different now than they were in the late 1990s. Again, my view is that if you make politics your objective, you're probably going to complicate what it is that you're setting out to do. There are important consequences. An Azerbaijan that has more money and that is more able effectively to make use of those resources to enrich its society, those being two very different things that require different policy responses, will be a country that is stronger, that is more capable of standing up to Russian pressure, that will have a different set of cards in its hands when it comes to conflict with Armenia or conflict with others. A Turkey that is an important energy transit and possibly trading center that has an impact on European energy security will have a whole different set of cards in its hands with respect to the Turkey-EU accession negotiations. An Iraq that is connected, or a northern Iraq that is connected with Turkey through energy trade and to Europe with energy trade, will change Iraq's internal political dynamics. As I say, if you make the politics the purpose of doing these things, in my opinion, you mess it up, especially in today's world. There are political games. That's, European energy security, let's be honest, it's about reducing Europe's extreme energy dependence on Russia, especially the eastern half of Europe. That's a political concern that countries want to try to address. They need to do it in ways that work commercially and economically, and I think that comes back to what Greg was referring to.
Well, I'm thinking, please don't walk away from this thing thinking about this entire dynamic is about Russia. Some of our friends may infer that our comments are really sort of anti-Russia. It's just the exact opposite. As Ross pointed out, there is a deep desire in Europe to diversify its supply. European countries, particularly the vulnerable, ones who are energy vulnerable, are looking for other sources of supply. And this dynamic we talked about today, Turkey's in the middle of it, is really about addressing European technical, commercial, market desires to diversify its supply. It's not about Russia. It's not about undermining Russia. The exact opposite. Everybody understands that Russia will remain an important, significant energy supplier to Europe. It is critically important that that supply continue that the right investment climate is established in Russia to permit the continued investment in the continued production of oil and gas to serve important markets in Europe. The European countries are looking to diversify. This is normal, this is predictable, and that's really what the dynamic is on the side. It's not a question about pro or anti-Russia.
And I
Please
think,
don't walk away
and
thinking
I
that.
think if you look at the energy sector as a whole and Europe's approach to it, it is not just about diversification of supply, but also lowering demand. And much of the acquis is focused on ways in which to lower demand domestically in each of the accession countries, as well as throughout the EU. And as you know, many countries, Germany and Nordic countries, have made tremendous gains in developing energy efficient buildings and distributing those kinds of equipment, developing that industry within their domestic economies, which are turning out to be huge sources of free energy, so to speak. So that's other part of it. It's not just about the supply side, it's also about the demand side.
That's right. Climate change as well. This is an important component of Europe's transition to a lower carbon future.
There's a question here, yeah. No? Did you?
Thank you very much. I would like to make some comments. I'm representing the Federation of Entrepreneurs Associations Germany. It's called briefly BUI. We are also a founding member of the European Turkish Business Confederation called Unity, based in Brussels, representing over 10,000 entrepreneurs from Europe. TAA and Tuscon are also very important partners of us. So first, I would like to emphasize the role of business organizations in economic dynamism. That's a very important point, and I guess you will agree that this event is also a good example for it. Before all, business people need stability, open markets, and minimum bureaucracy, and similar, and so on. There is no doubt that energy is important, which is very strong related with security, sustainability, and democracy. For example, in Germany, the field of renewable energy is, with respect to these issues, getting more and more important. Besides that, also the public opinion is demanding a change to renewables. We are interested in EU-Turkey relations and also very interested in the EU-US-American relations. On this convention, energy efficiency, clean energy, and renewable energy has also been mentioned very often. There is a huge potential in the field of renewable energy regarding cooperation of companies, know-how transfer, and also the technological alliance. So business organizations have the best opportunities to build bridges, so let us build more bridges in that field. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment. In the back.
I'll speak about it. I'd like to ask about the potential impact of Iranian sanctions on the whole Shah Deniz project, obviously with the Iranian company having a stake in Shah Deniz. Traditionally, European Union has been able to work around that, even with Shah Deniz 1. But now with the new drive for sanctions, what's the potential impact there in case there was no way to exclude Shah Deniz out of those sanctions, maybe?
We'll give that to you, all right? Did you want to, anyone?
I'm a businessman, I'm not.
Clearly, there are some potential issues that could arise depending on what further sanctions the executive branch seeks to promulgate, the U.S. executive branch seeks to promulgate, or if Congress passes some legislation. There have been various bills that have been either introduced or at least mooted that, according to some accounts, could have the effect of greatly complicating Shah Deniz and its doability because of the role that one of the Iranian companies has in that consortium. That legislation, at this point, I think, is some time off from being adopted. I actually read today in the cable portion that comes in I think it's published in the Washington Post, but I saw it online, that talks about new legislation, a new version of Iran sanctions legislation being talked about on the Hill that, at least as I looked at it, would appear not directly to affect this project. It's something that I think that I at least am concerned about the prospects of and I've said this publicly in testimony before Congress, of Iran sanctions legislation that may be well intentioned, but has the effect of bottling up Azeri gas and Turkmen gas and Iraqi gas that is essential and whose for European energy security, and whose development the United States for 20 years has sought to back specifically as a way to ensure that Iranian gas would not be developed. It would be a terrific shooting yourself in the foot exercise. As I say, the latest signals I've seen is that that's not the direction that it's going. Ambassador Dick Morningstar, in remarks at our conference last week or 2 weeks ago in Istanbul, said that he was not right now concerned about the legislation that's moving forward in Congress being a hurdle. I think we'll have to see how things develop.
Thank you. Take just a couple more questions. One right there.
Thanks. James Stoker, Young Professionals in Foreign Policy. The panel has spent a lot of time talking about gas resources in the Caucasus and the Central Asian area. But on the other side of Turkey, in the Eastern Mediterranean, there has also been discoveries of a significant amount of gas over the last few years. And along with that have come disputes, mostly bilateral, between several different countries, including Turkey and Cyprus. I was wondering how the panel sees that situation playing out, and perhaps what role Turkey and possibly even the United States could play in that.
Well, actually, it is, the reserves that has been found is enormous, and the exploration is still going on. If the new explorations also prove that the reserves are there, almost the same size, it gives a different dynamic to the region. I see the point. Actually, there's a lock there. I mean, I don't want to call it deadlock, but there are three keys. That one is in the hands of the European Union. I don't want to talk in the perspective of the southern Cyprus issue, and of course, definitely for Turkey, and the other one is in the hands of the Israel. So, well, that's that. Generally, hydrocarbons do not necessarily bring peace to the regions so far. But let's hope that it may. Well, let's say that if we couldn't manage so far the very peaceful Mediterranean because of other reasons, maybe this is the virtue of these resources could be a chance to let's say for a peace. But I believe that because the one technical way of getting this gas to the market is LNG. That's why the Israelis is doing a lot of other approach to use the southern Cyprus as a base to export hub, but even the terrain of the Mediterranean is a bit difficult. But I think that the pipeline will be also much easy, and the cost of the production offshore over there is, as far as I heard, I don't know, is considerably competitive. So I think it's not a very short term. I think the mid to long term, it might be interesting gameplay there. But in geopolitics, conflicts repeat themselves as long as you don't fix the underlying problems or the issues. So I think it's more than energy, I believe. So there is already reserves that long time in the Palestinian seas, and it is stuck there and it's not been used so long. So, and then we have to also consider that Egypt is running out of gas. So in the region there is not too many. Also, the need of the gas also in the region is getting more and more important.
Do you want to comment on that
I'll
as
make
well?
from a international oil company perspective. we'll talk about the politics, talk about technical and the market aspects. I would say two things. Number one is, as somebody who works for an international oil company, when there are discoveries or indications of more oil and more gas, everybody in my industry smiles. So we like this. This is great. Number two is I would ask you to take a very deep breath. When the press talks about discoveries of gas, this is not what you think about in terms of a discovery of oil. Gas is exceptionally difficult to develop, has a very long time horizon, and it is really politically complex. Talked about earlier, most of our conversation today and my presentation about Shah Deniz project gives you an example of just how complex this is. The timelines, I think my colleague is absolutely right. We built the Shah Deniz Phase 1 project in 7 years, and probably should have taken more time. Shell built its gas business in Nigeria. It took them 30 years. So this gives you a range for the development of gas projects. This is not something for today. This is really something, quite frankly, well into the next decade, perhaps into the following decade. But this is how you work the gas game. It's really about what's happening in the 2020s and the 2030s.
Well, thank you for that. I think we'll leave it there. I want to thank each of our panelists for your contributions today. I want to thank the Turkic American Alliance for hosting us. And I want to thank you all for coming in with your questions and your interest. Thank you very much. Let's thank the panel.